All right, no time to waste. This is the first ever emergency podcast in Pats Interference history. Emergency intro, at least. It is 8:45 Tuesday night, about 7 hours after I finished recording with Brian Barrett of The Ringer. We thought it was a solid double, just a solid episode, 7 big unanswered Patriots questions as they continue to roll through the offseason, get a little ahead, take a peek at week 1. What do they need to know? What don't we know about this team? Well, I'm recording here again by myself, because Stefon Diggs just answered one of those questions. Stefon Diggs is a New England Patriot. Let's say that one more time. Stefon Diggs, 4-time Pro Bowler, is a New England Patriot. The news breaks a little after 7 here tonight. According to ESPN, it is a 3-year deal worth up to $69 million. Nice, crisp dollar bills, including $26 million of which are guaranteed. The word I would use to first analyze, summarize, whatever, this edition is finally. Look, I talked a lot about Diggs on the radio last week. We didn't speak here. What I would have told you is, I expected this deal to go a little bit longer, like DeAndre Hopkins a couple of years ago. Diggs sees some other teams, his value goes up, the healthier he gets. The only way he signs with the Patriots is if they give them this big deal he doesn't think he'll get anywhere else. Ha! Well, here he is. And that deal, according to a couple executives I texted with soon after it happened and finally just got back to me, tweeted out one of these quotes. First one I asked, is this a win-win? One says, quote, yeah, I think so. Would just have major concerns about the ACL and the age. The other brings up mostly the same thing. Quote, feels a little rich for a 31-year-old coming off an ACL, but when you have a major need, it's natural to overpay a little bit. I co-sign on the second part because you know what? When I say finally, this is not just that the Patriots got Drake Maye, number 1 wide receiver. It's not only that they got their best receiver since the back end of Julian Edelman's prime. They finally have a blue chip talent around which they can build an offense. This is no more. Everyone needs to play their best all at once for us to move forward as an offense. This is no longer a group of receivers that defenses go, we can handle all of them one-on-one, and we can do whatever else we want with the other players in our defense. If we want to rush 4, great. If we want to blitz, great. Because we know our corners, our safeties, our linebackers on occasion can handle their receivers. Stefon Diggs changes all of that. Finally, the Patriots have solved, forget just their longest standing need, the oldest team need in the NFL. I'm talking about since 2020, okay? Since the heat of the pandemic, this has been a need for the Patriots. All due respect to Jacoby Myers and everyone else who kind of came through here. Stefon Diggs is the number 1. Whenever he gets fully healthy, Schefter says he's on track to play week 1. I highly doubt that, okay? That's just how ACLs go. It's typically a 12-month process. Even if he plays, he's going to knock rust off for a few weeks. When he does find that new number 1 form, and let's be clear, that form is still in there because last year, before the ACL tear, in late October, Diggs was tracking for his 7th straight 1,000-yard season. Okay, it is a small group in NFL history that can say they had 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Diggs obviously can't. He stopped at 6. He would have gotten there had it not been for the injury. Through 7+ games, 47 catches, 496 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Some of those stats came against the Patriots. When the Texans rolled in, won by 20, he had 6 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown. He beat Christian Gonzalez, who I guarantee you think very highly of. You should think very highly of. Top 5 corner in the NFL. For 3 catches in man-to-man coverage and that touchdown. Yes, there is still a 1B receiver in there with Stefon Diggs. At worst, a 2A. So when that receiver emerges, when he arrives, again, week 1, week 6, week 10, who knows? That allows Demario Douglas to be what he is, a slot receiver who maybe deserves some extra attention, but for the most part doesn't. It allows Kendrick Bourne to be the number 3 receiver he's always been, and Javon Baker and Jalen Polk to develop on their own timelines without the pressure of facing guys like Christian Gonzalez, except for, of course, in practice, and to see what they can become. Okay, the trickle-down effect of the Stefon Diggs deal is one of the best things the Patriots have done in a long, long time. We cannot look at this deal. 3 years, $69 million, $26 million guaranteed in a vacuum. And even if you did, who cares about the Kraft's money? If we're going to be in a market that rightfully complains about one of the cheapest ownership groups in the NFL, and you get this deal for that player, good, even if it's an overpay, as he said, from an executive. But you know what this means to the players, as I heard back from a longtime Patriot starter fairly recently? What do you think about the deal? Obviously, a huge help to the receivers, I said. A little bit leading, but whatever. Quote, I think this helps the team big time, so I love it. I'm not here to argue, okay? I don't think Diggs is the perfect player. I don't think this is the perfect deal. But for what the Patriots need, for what they have needed for years, what they have been reluctant to do, what they have failed to do via trade, what they have not been able to do in the draft for goddamn decades, they did tonight. And so with a 3-year deal, that even if Diggs is not himself until the very end of this upcoming season, you still have him for 2026. You still have him for 2027. Okay, and let's say things go south, because we can be honest here on the podcast. That's what we're here for. He's a guy who, after a period of time in Minnesota, drafted him, gave him a second contract, said, yeah, we're going to ship you to Buffalo. After a time in Buffalo, where he was a Pro Bowler every single year, 2020 to 2023, playing with one of the best quarterbacks alive, the Bills phased him out of the offense at the end. Said, we're going to send you to Houston. Well, in Houston, reportedly, everybody loved him. And the Patriots would know that because Josh McDaniels' brother, Ben McDaniels, was the receivers coach down there. And Houston didn't rush to go sign him, but they got Nico Collins, they've got Tank Dell, they got a bunch of receivers that they don't even know what to do with. Okay? If it goes south for the Patriots, that $26 million guaranteed, most of it's going to be paid out this year. Okay, you take a little dead cap hit in 2026 and you part ways. This is a win-win. And the Patriots need as many win-win deals as anybody. So what I think about this deal and what it does for the offense and everything we just covered for a guy who is a legitimate X, can separate from man coverage, can play a little bit inside if you want. There's all those different things after they strike out on Chris Godwin, can't trade or don't want to trade for DK Metcalf, failed to trade for Brandon Ayuk, which seems we can put that to bed now. They can still sign a Travis Hunter or draft a Travis Hunter at number 4 and pair him with Stefon Diggs. And that's something I would encourage, because this is a team now that has options with the number 4 pick. And that's the last part of this trickle-down effect. Elliott Wolf told a bunch of season ticket holders, I guess, last week, they felt like they could do whatever they wanted. They could take the best player available because they had addressed their needs. Disagree with Elliott Wolf? I presume everyone else in that room. But had he said it tonight, after the Patriots signed 4-time Pro Bowler Stefon Diggs, who, yes, is going to turn 32 in November, and yes, is coming off an ACL tear, but reportedly is ahead of schedule and is a guy who, in the locker room, has upset people because of his hyper-competitiveness and desire for the ball. No one's disagreeing with Elliott Wolf right now. The trickle-down effect of this deal is the best part, in addition to what we will all get to watch on Sundays whenever Stefon Diggs is there. And if you are still concerned about the football character part of this, first of all, God bless it for your football sensitivities. But the line I used last week in the radio, and I still didn't expect this, was this. If you are so concerned about a number 1 receiver coming in and upsetting the apple cart because he wants the ball and he's hyper-competitive, you don't believe enough in your culture. Shame on Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels, the Crafts, anyone else involved at the top. Well, they signed him. They're ready to handle whatever might come their way. And contractually, it seems that they protected themselves enough to make that happen, while also giving themselves the benefit of whatever Stefon Diggs has left. And whatever Stefon Diggs does have is going to be better than anything they've had in the room, they will have in the room outside of him this year and probably for years to come. So that's it. Stefon Diggs is a New England Patriot. I'm recording Monday, a full episode. We will flesh out these thoughts on Stefon Diggs with Mike Manansky. For now, Brian Barrett, 7 big questions, including what this offense will look like, though. I think that take for me is going to be a little bit outdated. Here comes a solid double. In the meantime, a home run deal for the Patriots. All right, after 1 week away, we are rested. We are ready. We are locked in. It's really either locked in or washed, I feel like, Brian. I know you're not as old as I am now, but mid-30s, we have 2 states. It is locked in or it is completely washed. It is also Tuesday, regardless of how you're feeling. You and I are here to talk big questions the Patriots have not answered as we continue to wait for the draft, which we'll get here eventually. Free agency long over. Owners meeting next week. I'll be there with Doug Hyde. You, in the meantime, are always doing podcasts over at Off the Pike with Spotify. Ty McShay was on recently. You have a big Sox preview coming up. Celtics all the time. And I'm just excited to talk to you, man. It's been a while, and I feel like when we get to these big questions, like I have my list, you have yours. We've done this format a lot. You're going to have 1 or 2 things that I don't think that people see coming.
Yeah, I'm excited too, man. And I'm glad that it was a day in between this and a college basketball game over the weekend that you'd be recovered from, because I think it was wise to record on Tuesday, not Monday, because that would have been difficult. Although we'll see what happens with the legal proceedings there with your UConn Huskies after somebody's getting in trouble for releasing the video. You got this whole thing going on with Danny Hurley, man. The program's great, but man, Hurley is a loose cannon.
He's a maniac. I am not detached. I'm not in denial about my head coach. of my high skis. Yes, it was a valiant game. Honestly, the most fun I'd had watching a game all year in a team that you kind of figured out early. Oh, this isn't as good as you had hoped. And then they pushed Florida. You get the rare underdog stance, and I think it was maybe the best game of the tournament till that point. But separate from that, yes, he's a maniac. I don't have any surprise or shock that he's trashing the refs walking off the court in an emotional moment. I was shocked that their PR director, and I used to know people on the comm staff, for people who don't know, threatened to end a reporter's life, specifically the reporter who captured Dan Hurley on video saying, "Oh, Baylor, I hope you don't get effed the way that the refs effed us." And to me, that's like Kevin Clark put it best in a tweet saying, "Hey, look, if you threaten to end someone's life or career, you better have the power to do so." I don't think the comms director for men's basketball at UConn quite has that power. But I thought to myself, as much as you do look like a jerk, and deservedly so, like complete loser move for, hey, if your head coach misbehaves, it's not the reporter's fault for reporting. But if I'm going to extend Danny Hurley the grace of having a heated moment, I should probably do the same for an SID, who frankly should know better because he's not in the heat of competition. He's just around it. Anyway, we move on. Did Syracuse make the tournament, by the way?
Haven't in years, man. Not a very good team. Hey, Carmelo Anthony's kid's coming in next year, so that's like the hope with the team. But they've been really bad, man. They have not been good in years. Tough team to watch. I did watch them at BC. What was that? Probably like 2 months ago, beginning of January. They actually won that game. So they're 1-0 when I went to games this year. That's all I care about.
Good for you.
And we're football school, man. Knocked off Cam Ward in Miami this year.
That was a hell of a game too. I remember watching that in person and being like, okay, this is Miami locking in the playoff spot. They got off to a big lead. And no. There's something in that very stale air of the Carrier Dome, or the building formerly known as the Carrier Dome. I don't know if they've renamed it. That got something going there. Anyway, we have big questions here to come up. Since I last recorded, though, there have been a handful of small little tidbits. Look, it's Patriots news. Christian Ellis is back. Patriots opted to match the offer sheet that the Raiders gave him. It's a 2-year deal, according to Jeremy Fowler, who reported just before we started recording, $13.5 million total value. That is up $10 million from what he was originally going to get on the tender the Patriots had extended him. And so that is thanks to the Raiders, who again will not get Christian Ellis. Still probably a backup, right? Like, as you remember his play last year, better than you expected. He's fast, but there's some issues with play diagnosis and some instinct stuff that can get sometimes smoothed out over time. But he'll be behind Robert Spillane and Juwan Bentley, maybe Jelani Tavai, unless I'm crazy.
Yeah, and then the Bentley thing is weird to me, right? I was talking with Mark Daniels last week on my pod. So essentially, he's trying to lose weight so he can be better in Mike Vrabel's system. But you have Spillane, you have Bentley. Callahan, one of the things from last year, and maybe you noticed it more so than I did, but I didn't realize like how important he was to the defense until he went down. So at least there's some depth at the linebacker position, because I was saying, like, man, he should go in there and ask for a new contract based on the way that this team can't perform and how they referenced it. Like, hey, we don't have him at the end. Look, you also didn't have Barmore as well. But that run defense just completely fell off a cliff without Bentley in there. And they had been they'd been a great run defense for a long time. But when it came to last year, when he went out of the lineup, it was not great.
No, it was terrible. It's week 3, and then, we all watched the rest of that season. He is now in a contract year, which is interesting because he was the first batch of those contract extensions that the Patriots began to hand out at the end of Belichick's tenure and when Elliott Wolf took over, that you're like, and it's not exorbitant by any means, but he's a player that has every reason to be motivated in a new, and clearly is. I mean, the guy's now under 240, and I think he came into the league at 255. So he understands, like, look, if I want to get paid, if I even just want to stay here, I better get in shape with the new head coach and the new direction they're taking this defense. I think he'll have value. The other move that we had, Joey Sly off to Tennessee. So it looks like the Patriots are going to draft their third kicker in 5 years. I don't care who they take, so long as you thoroughly research all of the tattoos that may be attached to that person's body and what they mean and where they came from, because that, of course, has been an issue, which also means old pal Nick Folk is out with the Titans. I don't know if he'll bounce back. Maybe he'll come back. We'll see. And then Stefon Diggs, which is really the only news that people care about over the last 7 days since we have not recorded. I have not discussed this on here. I know you did on your pod. He came in for dinner last Wednesday, had a full visit Thursday, left without a contract. They checked in physically on him as he recovered from a torn ACL that he suffered last October. How did you see this fit, and has your mind changed at all in the time that's passed since Stefon Diggs came and went?
Well, it feels like on both sides, it came from desperation, right? Because maybe Diggs felt like he would have a bigger, more robust market, even though he is coming off a torn ACL that happened in week 8. So who knows when he's going to be back on the field. But from a Patriots perspective, all these guys that we have heard about in the offseason that they were targeting, like Chris Godwin, went off the board pretty quickly, going back to Tampa, right? The DK Metcalf thing, I know you and Doug reported on that. They were sort of worried about, do we want to make him the highest paid player? Well, if you're worried about a culture fit, do you really want to bring in a guy like Stefon Diggs? And look, Diggs last year before the injury, he was 62 yards per game, which is his lowest since 2017. Every year prior to that, he's 70 or more, including a 95 and an 89 in there. Hadn't had a 100-yard game since week 6 of 2023. And how long are you possibly signing him for? A year? And then he hits the market again? So I guess like you'd get him on his best behavior and you desperately need weapons. There's that part of it, but it's not like you're building any sort of long-term chemistry with Stefon Diggs. Like if it's me, I'm still looking out for that Ayuk thing. If we're talking about a guy coming off a torn ACL that's significantly younger, and 2 years ago, he was legitimately one of the best receivers in the game, and you still don't have that number one option. And I don't even know if Diggs is a number one option next year. Now, on this specific team, he would be your best receiver skills wise. But when are you getting him? Like week 8, week 9. So Drake Maye doesn't really have any time to work with him to begin with. So I would much more be invested in looking after Ayuk. And especially like if it was one thing, if it was Cooper Kupp, right? Where Cooper Kupp, there's been no problems with him in any locker room, and he's only been in the Rams locker room. He's been productive when he's on the field. The questions are just the injuries. I wouldn't have an issue with that. But we know that Diggs has basically had an issue everywhere he's been in his entire NFL career. I think it's kind of funny, like, and I know Houston not nearly in the cap situation the Patriots are in, but we don't see Houston looking to bring him back, do we?
I haven't heard anything. And it's interesting, too, because you can look at those numbers last year where he was tracking for his 6th straight 1,000-yard season in Houston. You go, oh, the numbers aren't what they are. He was also surrounded with probably the best cast of talent he's ever been with. So, like, Nico Collins is the number one. He knows that when he arrives there. Tank Dell, until obviously he got hurt, was the number 3. You know, the offensive line fell off, as we all know, in Houston. But the point is, like, that was a great situation for Houston to welcome him, saying, hey, you're on your 3rd team. There's a guy here who's better than you. This is a contract year, and we'll guarantee some more money. I think they bumped him up to 20 last year. But you have to perform, and there's every reason for you to kind of be in line. And while you might think, hey, okay, he comes to the Patriots, it is desperation, you made the most salient point of all of how long is this contract? Like, we could talk about money. The Patriots have money. Give the money to who would be this person who would be your best receiver since 2018 at the back end of Julian Edelman's prime. But if he's not healthy until September, October, and Kendrick Bourne tore his ACL within a couple days a year ago of when Stefon Diggs did this past October, he missed the first 4 weeks of the season. He's a little bit younger than Stefon Diggs. You don't want to just pay for that couple of months there, right? You want a 2-year deal, by which point he would be 33 at the end of that. And then you go, if it is a locker room headache, that's kind of the downside here. Where I've landed, though, is this. Anytime over the last 6-7 days, someone at the gym or at the bar or a family member or a friend asked me, hey, what do you think about Stefon Diggs? And I had to look into the eyes of these people who, as I've said, have not rooted for one of the better receivers in the game since 2018. I could not, in good conscience, Brian, tell them it was a bad signing because as soon as he hobbles into the room, does not even have to be on 2 feet and walking normally, Stefon Diggs is the best player in that room. For a team that needs talent, and I've said it time and again, the talent is the talent, and it's probably the worst in the league. You need guys like him. But it has to be 2 years or more, and that's where you get into, well, does he really want to be here for that long?
Well, yeah, and that goes to the whole, hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? The Patriots just need legitimate weapons at the receiver position. So I do understand it from that perspective. I don't know if I want to deal with the headache. And the other thing that I would say too is like, we have now seen, and you can't bank on this, but this theme in the NFL where, okay, the best receivers are never hitting free agency, right? Because those guys are getting signed, right? Like the Patriots thought Calvin Ridley was an elite receiver last year, which we all know he wasn't, but he was the best guy that was available on the market. The only other way these guys become available, the elite guys that are still in their prime, is via trade. And that team would have to screw something up, right? The Titans trading away A.J. Brown, that just made no sense whatsoever. Or it's somebody that's disgruntled or wants more money in the case of Ayuk. And then we know the whole story, like Shanahan fought to keep him, but it rarely happens. Stefon Diggs, it happened when he was in his prime with the Vikings because he was disgruntled. Now, and Tyreek Hill, disgruntled, and the Chiefs thought that they could survive without him, which clearly they did. They won 2 Super Bowls without him. But I do think, like, you want to get more talent in the room, but I also look down the road. Could CeeDee Lamb be that guy a year from now where Dallas goes in the wrong direction again? And I don't know if anybody expected their coaching hiring. Like Schottenheimer, did he get an interview anywhere else for any other job? Like, would any other team have interviewed him for OC? Probably not, right? So what if it's Diggs next offseason? I know you can't plan for that, but I don't want to invest. I don't want to be in the Stefon Diggs business really for more than a year. And to your point, you wouldn't want him here for less than a year. So I'm just sort of out on the player because I just don't trust him. Everywhere he's been, there's been an issue. And what happens here if the offense isn't moving the ball, or there's a game where they say, hey, we're just going to run the ball a ton? Like, how is Diggs going to react to all that? It's one thing in Houston where last year they're a playoff team from the previous season. They're trying to win. He comes in. He knows that Nico Collins is the guy. He comes in here. He's the best receiver, as you mentioned, immediately. So I wouldn't be able to put up with the headache. I'm actually surprised that the Patriots are entertaining this.
Well, you mentioned it off the top, the desperation. Desperation generally drives you to places that you don't expect to be. That's whether you're a person walking down the street, driving your car, running a football team, or hobbling around on a torn ACL. I will push back, though, on a little bit of the character concerns, having done a little bit of digging on this, because I think it's important to separate, not just Stefon Diggs from Tyreek Hill, who punched a child in the chest,
right?
But Stefon Diggs from even DK Metcalf, who has competitive character concerns, and that the guy will like loaf on occasion. The ball's not coming my way. I'm going to half-heartedly jog this, or I'm not even going to look over in the direction of the quarterback. Stefon Diggs gives maximum effort. That dude is competitive as hell. The issue is when he's not the center of attention and not getting enough reps or getting enough targets. You're going to hear about it, even if you're Josh Allen, now reigning MVP, and before that, perennial MVP candidate. The issue, if you are the Patriots, are, okay, even if he deserves targets relative to the other younger receivers, is it so much so that we want to embolden him? Because as soon as you do pay him whatever the money would be, let's say it's 2 years, $30 million, most of it's guaranteed. So you're talking 13, 14 a year. And Scott Zolik said, 16 will get it done, which means it's not remotely close to what he's going to get. Anytime you give a person that kind of money, you embolden them and you empower them. Are you emboldening and empowering the best of Stefon Diggs to rehab and prove himself to the rest of the league? I'm still that guy. Or are you empowering and emboldening the worst of him that looks around and goes, even if I'm not open, you are not throwing the ball to Kayshon Boutte over me. You are not throwing the ball to Javon Baker or Jalen Polk or Matt Collins over me. I'm Stefon Diggs. So I do share in a little bit of the concerns. I just think the other counterpoint to that, as I ping pong back and forth with myself, is to say, if you're that worried about a player who will work hard and fit in with most of your culture, but you're concerned about, I don't really know if we can handle that. Well, you don't believe in your culture strong enough. Okay. A lot of the best receivers are divas. And he did push his way out in Minnesota and split the relationship with Josh Allen at the end, which I don't know why you would ever do that as a receiver. He's in a place now, you just have to hope that maybe he's matured competitively a little bit. And I would get the risk if you're the Patriots, understanding that year one, he has to be on his best behavior. After that, we'll see.
Yeah. And the other thing to this is you think if, let's say hypothetically, the Patriots draft a weapon with their 4th pick, if they view Travis Hunter, we can get into this later, as a receiver, or let's just say it's the 2nd round, right? The Patriots go after a receiver then, and they still drafted, and nobody's really a huge Jalen Polk fan, but they drafted him in the 2nd round, and they drafted Baker last year in the 4th round. Over the next few years, they have to figure out, are any of these guys going to be viable options going forward? So there are going to be some targets that goes to those guys that if they were on a better team, they wouldn't get. So how is Diggs going to handle a situation like that where guys are getting involved? I don't want to say more than him, but I just feel like when it comes to that could be where he could be a little bit prickly as well, where he looks at it, it's like, wait, hold on. These guys are getting targets and I'm not getting 15, 16 targets. I want to get to a certain amount of yardage per game so I can hit the market again. That's where I think it could be an issue.
Yeah. And so let's end it here because I want to get to the big questions, which are going to cover a lot. I think you and I are lower than consensus on the notion of bringing Stefon Diggs in. You and I both understand why they would. To me, where I would like to leave this is, I think this is a real parallel to the Andre Hopkins situation of a couple years ago, right? Remember, he gets cut. There's no injury concerns, but he's an older receiver who's going to want his targets. He takes his time going around and visits Tennessee, comes up to New England in June. All of us are like, oh my God, I'm finally going to do it. Is Bill going to sign a receiver? He's going to give him a lot of money. No, he signs in July with the Titans. And to me, I look at Stefon Diggs and go, his value goes up the healthier he gets. Why is he in a rush unless you absolutely blow him away with an offer that exceeds whatever else other interest he's gotten from around the league? And teams around the league that I've checked in with don't even know how healthy he is. So this is a real variable here. I just would not bank on this if he does come to New England happening anytime soon. And if it does, to me, it would indicate the same point you brought up at the beginning, a lot more desperation than we're accustomed to. So if you're him, you wait. You don't need to go to minicamp. You don't need to go to OTAs. You just need to get healthy and wait, because that money will be waiting certainly in the summer. Guys go down, and when you're in the best shape that you've been in since you tore your ACL. So that's why I land on this. Just remember the Hopkins situation. I think this is going to follow a very, very similar path.
Yeah, it's a great point because somebody gets hurt in training camp. A team that's a contender could call him and say, hey, actually, we are interested now. So it actually does.
For example, just come on back. We still got a spot for you.
Yeah. And Diggs could look at it and say, all right, well, it totally makes more sense for me to wait. The only way that I take a Patriots offer at this point, based on where they're at, is if they totally overblew me in terms of what they offered, right? If it was like a huge deal on a 1-2 year deal, he's going to take it with the money. But if it's not what he's looking for, and as you alluded to, they're far apart, I'm just going to wait this thing out. That's what I do if I was Diggs as well.
Yeah, and he doesn't have a ring, so I'm sure he wants to go to a contender in the first place. But hey, we spent a lot more time on that than I expected, and maybe it was overdue. Okay, the 7 biggest questions facing the Patriots still left unanswered after free agency coming up after this.
Time to talk not about football or anything like that. Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, because when I'm not on this podcast and I'm sitting at home and I'm watching the Celtics, or it could be a hockey game, or it could be a baseball game. Sox are just around the corner. I am playing Prize Picks, and I am winning. And I would like you, as someone who supports this podcast, to win a little bit too. Because right now at Prize Picks, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash and run your game all season long. When you build your lineup, you know the deal. 2 to 6 players, all right? Every single time you go to Prize Picks, online or on the app, you'll see a player, and they'll have a stat. And all you have to do with your lineup is pick the player, go more or less on that stat. It could be Jason Tatum, 5 threes. If you think he'll hit more than 5 threes, he's going to hit more. If you think Kristaps Porzingis will have less than 18 points, hit less. Boom. That's a lineup right there. So 2 to 6 player stat projections over at Prize Picks. Basketball, hockey, baseball around the corner. Of course, football will be back too. And when you sign up today, if you're a new customer, here's the best part. You get $50. 50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at Prize Picks. You don't even need to win to get the $50 bonus 50. You just have to play. So sign up today. Download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and you will get $50 instantly with the promo code CLNS after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your...
All right, like most guests in this podcast who I somehow trick onto just returning again and again and again. You received some homework, sir. I asked you to give 4 big questions that have been unanswered. I have 3 and a couple backups in case we overlap. And I said to you, hey, look, everyone's asking who the hell's going to play left tackle week 1. Everyone's asking, what are they going to do in the draft or via trade with receiver? And we should probably talk about those at some point, but also feel free to take this in any direction that you want, because the Patriots are working on things beyond the obvious. We know that they're bringing in Dylan Sampson, a running back, for a top 30 visit among the little news nuggets that have come out. So they're looking at other positions. You could go in other places in the organization, from ownership, the front office, the coaching staff, player development, wherever you want to go. What are some unanswered questions you still have about this team before we get to kickoff in week 1 in September?
Okay, so when I look at this defense, I like a lot of what they did. Bringing in Milton Williams, even if it's an overpay, he's going to have to play, of course, a lot more snaps than he did in Philadelphia. Carlton Davis makes a lot of sense, especially with his relationship with Terrell Williams. I like bringing in Spillane. You had all this money. It made sense to spend a ton of cash in free agency. And I love, you already have your #1 corner in Christian Gonzalez. We don't know what's going to happen with Barmore, but I just wonder with the defense, do we know like that a Mike Vrabel defense is going to get into the top 10, top 5 category in the near future? Because I looked at his numbers in Tennessee: points, 3rd, 12th, 24th, 6th, 14th, 16th. In his time with the Titans, they were 22nd in EPA, 17th in success rate, 5th in rush EPA, really good, 26, Callahan, in dropback EPA. 3 of the 6 years, they were 20th or worse in yards. So I think when we look at Mike Vrabel, like the first thing you think of is the culture and the in-game stuff. Like when he was trolling Belichick with something Belichick had done earlier in the season to the Jets. But are we sure like this defense, it has to be improved from last year based on all the injuries they had. And there were times last year where they weren't ready for the play. Like when the snap was happening, they were not ready. They were like out of position. But I'm just not so sure. I think there's like almost this assumption with the fan base that Vrabel is like this elite defensive mind. And I don't want to like rain on that parade. I'm just not so sure that has ever been proven true. And I'm not saying he had the best personnel ever in Tennessee, but like bring in Harold Landry. I get it. He had 9 sacks, and the Patriots were not a team that got after the quarterback they didn't do it often, right? They were last in the NFL in sacks, but he's also near the bottom of the league in win rate, right? So that was an overpay too. I don't know. And maybe that's my question to you. Is Vrabel and Terrell Williams like this great defensive brain trust? Because it almost feels like to me the assumption is, well, now it's going to get back to like what it was with Bill and Steve and before Steve, Brian Flores, etc. And I just don't know if that's true.
So before anyone dismisses Brian's skepticism might be strong, but your questioning attitude towards this, might I remind everyone that before you came on last season, or when you came on before last season started, and I asked you, hey, what's on your mind? And you go, are we sure the Patriots defense is going to be good? And you weren't even talking about top 5. You weren't talking about top 10. You were saying, are they going to be in top half of the league? And you listed reasons X, Y, and Z. And I was like, okay, this is a bit extreme, Brian. No. You were correct, sir. Bottom 5 in any metric that was worth its salt. And we don't have to recap that. But the point is, I think the question is fair because there were a lot of things involved in Tennessee. And you could point to, okay, that same game you referenced where he beats Tom Brady in the last game Brady ever played as a Patriot. Next round, upsets Lamar Jackson on the road, goes to Kansas City, has the Chiefs on the ropes. And granted, we're talking 5-6 years ago now, in a way that few teams had the Chiefs on the rope. And there was a Sunday night game. They also went into Kansas City, and the Titans held them to something like 13 or 16 points. They destroyed them when the Chiefs came to Tennessee and visited. Or you look at the numbers you just cited and then go, okay, well, talent obviously factored in. And there was an overwhelming talent there, but specifically at corner, they had an issue developing players there. Like the defensive linemen always played particularly well. Harold Landry, Jeffrey Simmons, the investments there hit. But what did you do when the picks didn't hit? And I think you saw more development in the front 7, which would be encouraging to me in what seems to be like an okay linebacking core. But in the secondary, I feel much more confident that the Patriots have a Christian Gonzalez who's already a ready-made Pro Bowl caliber player, that they don't have to worry about developing him or Carlton Davis because the staff in Tennessee didn't really do that. And you could extend the same to Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers. The young players you need to develop are places that his staff historically did, and that's mostly along the defensive line. But I think it's a totally fair question.
Yeah, and my whole thing is I want to be clear. I love the Vrabel hire. I think he's an awesome coach. I think he's going to be awesome for the culture. And in game on Sunday, I feel so confident with that guy coaching the team. Like he's going to make the right decisions. And even some of the really good coaches across the league, you can't say that about, right? Like Kyle Shanahan, a lot of his in-game decisions are not great. A couple of years ago, you could say the same thing about Sean McVay, and he's gotten better when it comes to that. Like I think Vrabel.
Well, why did McVay get better? Because John Stryker was there a year ago. And since he left, McVay goes, I owe him a ton because of everything he did for me as our management and game coordinator.
Yeah, so that makes it like all that stuff makes me feel real confident. I just feel like when I saw Harold Landry coming back, I'm like, oh, like we're getting the band back. And the other thing about like Milton Williams, I think it's worth taking a shot at him. Like if you look at the numbers going all the way back to the playoffs and the regular season, he was number 1 in win rate. But he did also have Jalen Carter next to him. Now the projection would be that he's going to be really good, but he's going to get more attention. I just wonder how good this defense can be next year and going forward. But you make a really good point on the corners. Like you already have Carlton Davis is a good corner, even if his health has been an issue. And Gonzalez is a stud. He just made an all-pro situation. So that probably helps them more so than anything else if that's where they had their biggest issues in Tennessee.
Yeah, like Adoree Jackson was like fine, but not great. Even Malcolm Butler's prime was behind. Like they didn't advance anyone. It was just whatever you were coming into Tennessee is pretty much who you were. The development is what separates the good teams from the great ones. And Tennessee, like every team, had its strengths, had its weaknesses. I'll also say this because it's a point I raised when the Patriots went from Matt Patricia to Bill O'Brien, and even some instances, the end of Bill Belichick, not prime Bill Belichick, to Gerard Mayo. There's a bump from just not being the last ex that you had. Like as soon as someone holds the door open for you, this new person that you're dating, like you're like, oh, that was so great because that just never happened in the last relationship you were with. Like Mike Vrabel can do no wrong here. It's just to say give it a little bit of time before we all move forward, even though you and I are in complete agreement. Homer and hired the right guy. I said it before even Drake Maye got fired. We just know we want to see and feel that validated right away. So small things are going to seem bigger, even if in the long run, Mike Vrabel's got to prove it in terms of development and everything that he has promised to do here in New England before we just assume that the defense, as you said, will be top 10, 12, maybe even above average. One question I have, which dovetails perfectly with this, that we might get an answer to because he's supposedly coming in for a checkup maybe in a few days, and then the offseason program starts next week. Christian Barmore, is he healthy enough to return to the field of play? Because the last time we saw Christian Barmore over a full season, he was a top 10 defensive tackle by Pro Football Focus grades. He had 8.5 sacks, 16 quarterback hits, and 34 hurries, all of which led a very good 2023 Patriots defense. So if he can return, Brian, I see a guy who not only plays 3 downs, but gives Milton Williams a little bit more of a breather. He forms a 4-man rush with the 2 of them, Keon White and Harold Landry. The Patriots, by extending it to blitz less, probably, which is the way Mike Vrabel wants to play defense. And you unlock a lot of different fronts, but because between him and Williams, you have 2 guys who can either play, shade over the nose in a 1 technique, not head up on the center, but just over the shoulder. Or you can kick out all the way to a 5 technique and be on the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle in the old school 3-4 defensive fronts if they want to mix and match. If Christian Barmore, though, cannot return due to blood clots, which had recurring symptoms in December, Williams better start. And you're getting more reps from guys like Eric Johnson and Jaquelin Roy and Kyrus Tonga, because those are the defensive tackles behind him. You probably have a higher blitz rate, and you're building fronts really that just generate one-on-ones for Milton Williams. There's not this whole, you park Barmore and Milton Williams at opposite ends of the line of scrimmage and go, okay, you can't double both of them because then you're vulnerable to blitzes up the middle. So, it sounds extreme, but for I don't know if he's a tentpole player, like purple chip, red, purple, blue chip, whatever, he changes so much of what they could be, whether Christian Barmore, who some people thought was rushed back into action last year, and I think we're validated by that, if he just can't play football because of blood clots. But if he can, he raises the floor, the ceiling, opens the playbook, everything.
Well, even if you go back to his rookie season, he was one of the best rookie defensive linemen in the entire NFL. And then year 2 took a little bit of a step back. I believe he was banged up a little bit. But prior to getting the contract, that was totally justified. He was playing at a very high level, and he was one of your only star players on the team. It made total sense to give him that extension. Then, unfortunately, he has the blood clot issues. Now, if you look at him compared to Milton Williams, I think you have a real argument that if Barmore is healthy going into next season, that he could be the superior player. And that's not meant to be an indictment on Milton Williams. It's just the fact that Milton Williams has not played a ton in terms of the percentage of the snaps in his career. And Barmore has, I go back to 2 years ago, there was moments and people were tweeting him out where he is just taking offensive linemen and essentially throwing them in the backfield. If you go back and watch some of his, and I know he's a defensive lineman, so highlights, maybe the wrong word, but seeing some of the stuff from him 2 years ago, he was incredible. And if you have that combo of Milton Williams and Christian Barmore, then I think you're really cooking with gasoline. But I almost, until you brought it up, I almost have him out of my mind because he comes back and then it's the same issue, right? And you mentioned people thought that maybe they brought him back too early. I just don't have a ton of hope that he's going to be healthy and ready to roll at the beginning of next season. And it's not something you can mess around with, what he's actually dealing with.
Yeah, and same old qualifiers everyone should give in a discussion around health and medicals. Brian's not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. But given the timelines shared with us by Elliot Wolf and Mike Vrabel, checkup late March. Here we are. It's March 25th. And then April 7th, again, the offseason program. Whatever he can do, I'm sure they will let him do. But a lot of this is out of everybody's control. And so I say again, you brought that up, picking up people in the backfield. This is not an exaggeration to say it was like your fun uncle who suddenly has a 6-month-old or an 8-month-old in their lives, picking the kid up and hoisting them above and just kind of toying with them before putting them back down. That was Christian Barmore in that Christmas Eve game in Denver. This is a guy who can single-handedly destroy backfields. And if he returns, we'll have a running mate, even, because in 2023, he didn't have Matt Judon, right? He got hurt in week 4 and he was done. Milton Williams will be the best defensive lineman he's ever played with and arguably the best pass rusher Christian Barmore has played with, pending whatever he's going to do next season compared to what Matt Judon did before that. So, yeah, it's huge. I think it fundamentally changes who they can be, what they want to do, and what they can do. All right, question number 3. What do you got?
All right, so my next question is, It's kind of a hypothetical situation. It feels like now there's an assumption, and maybe we'll be wrong on this, that two of the quarterbacks are going to go in the top three. And let's, for the sake of the conversation, I know the Patriots, everybody, we all hope that Carter's there at 4. But let's say he's not. Let's say Carter and the two quarterbacks go. At number 4, I feel like it's going to be really difficult. We've heard this idea of trading back. What are you really getting if you're trading back, right? So I've almost been to this area of the draft and I look at it and I wonder, how do you not take Hunter at 4, right? Because, and let me run through this real quick. Mason Graham now, we mentioned getting Barmore back possibly, but you just gave Milton Williams all this money. Will Campbell, we know about the T-Rex arms. Like, it just hasn't worked with a player with those dimensions before in the, like, we don't see it happen often. And I know people would say, well, Mike Vrabel, they drafted Peter Skoronski. Well, yeah, he doesn't play tackle anymore. So even if they were really high in Skoronski, it has been proven that that was actually the wrong pick. Is it Walker that you would take there? And if you're moving back, how far are you moving back? And who's giving you a lot of capital to move up to 4? And when I look at Hunter, we just talked about the need for a receiver with Diggs. Well, Hunter last year, while also playing defense, he won the Heisman, we know, but he also won the Bolindikoff for the best receiver at the college level. He is by far the best athlete in the draft. And that's not even debatable. This guy played offense and defense and still racked up well over 1,000 yards last year and had a bunch of touchdowns as a receiver. So if it's me and I'm the Patriots and I am absolutely desperate for a weapon, and we'll see, like, maybe something happens down the road with an Ayuk or whatever, my best avenue to improve that position is drafting the guy that maybe, like, it's almost like Shohei Ohtani. I thought his comments on Ohtani were ridiculous. Like, what Ohtani does is more difficult. But there was never a question with Ohtani when he was coming over was, hey, can he be an elite pitcher? Everybody knew he could. Could he be an elite hitter? Everybody knew he could. Could he do both? I don't think anybody is looking at, say, Travis Hunter and saying, can he be a really, really good NFL receiver? I don't think anybody doubts that. Can he be a great corner? I think everybody has him as the number 1 corner. So if I made him a receiver, I had Todd McShay on my pod a couple of weeks ago, and he compares him to Garrett Wilson. If I'm getting Garrett Wilson with the 4th pick on a team that doesn't have receiving talent, it's a total hit. And oh, by the way, I can moonlight him on defensive situations, whether it's in the red zone, whether it's some certain third downs. And you know what? If he doesn't work at receiver, which I doubt that would be the case, 2 years from now, I can say, hey, Travis, want to try defensive back again? Remember you used to play that at college? So if that scenario plays itself out, I don't know how I could pass on Hunter, because if I look at this 2 years from now and say I drafted Walker or I reached for Campbell or somebody along those lines, and then I'm looking at it and it's like, wait, hold on. Travis Hunter just had 1,000 yards and we haven't had 1,000-yard receiver since when? It would be very difficult for me to pass up that level of talent. I know it's not a perfect fit, but I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I'm honestly a little surprised this was one of your big questions, because I would draft Travis Hunter as soon as I had a blank card to hand in and scribble his name down and sprint to the podium. Like, that's how I view him. And a hat tip, some excellent reporting. Mark Daniels, who's just on your pod, been at Mass Live, him and Karen Garigi and Chris Mason said Travis Hunter is the best receiver in the draft as the Patriots see it, and the best corner. And the way things went in free agency, you just stick him at receiver and wash your hands. And Burt Breer, I did radio with last week, brought up that same scenario. Maybe just after 1 year, if it doesn't work at receiver, then flip him to corner. I'm like, no. You cannot hand this generational prospect, and he is truly a generational prospect in Travis Hunter, to a region that has forgotten what elite receivers look like in their own uniforms, and then take that away after 1 year. Like, the biggest knock in him, aside from, and I've raised this too, guy's 6'1", 188 pounds, which is light. I worry about the durability. Someone who's got double the miles of any player, typically coming into the draft, unless you went to Alabama under Saban when they just ground everyone to dust. There are some issues there. But the lack of refinement at receiver, first of all, he overcame that to still, as you said, win the Bolitnikoff last year as the nation's best receiver in college football. But secondarily, imagine what he'll do when he can devote all of his time to playing receiver as opposed to splitting the duties. That's why he was unrefined in college. I don't have any worry about that. I'll ask you this, though, because this is a question I have a harder time answering as we get deeper and deeper into the draft. And more people think 2 quarterbacks go, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders ahead of the Patriots, which is what they want. Let's be clear. That is what the Patriots want. And they think could be a possibility. But if not, and they're there at 4, and Travis Hunter is gone, and Abdul Carter is gone, and one of the quarterbacks, and you do not have a viable trade in hand to act upon, what are you doing Brian Barrett at number 4?
Probably one of the Georgia edge guys.
Oh, okay.
Walker. Because it's still a position in need, right? Keon White, the way that he started last season, we're all like, whoa, the Patriots get their next star. And then it's like, what did he have? All but like half of his sacks in the first 4 games of the season. Like, didn't he have 1 half sack after that, or 1 full sack after that the rest of the year? And then he had those weird quotes about, I don't know what the future holds. It's like, what do you mean? You're going to be on the Patriots next season? So I would probably take an edge there because, or maybe Warren, like it, because you still need a number 1 option, but taking a tight end in the first round, it's been so hit or miss. If you look back through the history, like I think it's fresh in our mind because of what Bowers did last year. Like neither one of these guys that are going to go in the first round, the tight ends, neither one is Bowers. Like Bowers is a complete freak. It's unfortunate for him that he went to the Raiders, but yeah, I'd probably go edge because I can't do the Campbell thing. And Membu is he played right tackle. The Patriots just did this, right? And Membu is like unbelievable at the combine in terms of some of the athleticism and all that, but that's a risk too, because okay, if he's a great right tackle, sure, that's awesome, but I'd rather get somebody at a more premium position.
It's a surprising answer because I think some of the Georgia guys, like, look, whether it's Michael Williams, who would be much more of a projection from an athletic standpoint, because even his pressure rates, forget the traditional QB stats and sacks, box score measurements are not great. That's a projection there at 4. In the same way Armand Membu would be projecting to play left tackle. Jalen Walker, who I love generally as a prospect, I think would have fit perfectly in the old scheme where you would have guys like Hightower or Jelani Tavai, bulk him up a little bit, flips from off-ball linebacker, which would have been his primary position in the old scheme. Right now, he's a little bit big to be an off-ball linebacker here, and he's a little bit light to be on the edge. So he's still in that tweener mold, but even more so the fact that they're going to this new scheme where even Harold Landry's got like 15 pounds of him. I know it's lighter, faster front. Don't get me wrong. That's not lost on me, but there's not a clear-cut spot for him in this roster. I'm still stuck here because I know McShay's been on your pod, said he doesn't see Ted McMillan as a Drake London carbon copy, not worthy of a top 5 pick, top 10 pick. I don't know, man. Like, if I can't trade back on the Patriots, Membu, I like his tape more than I thought I would upon a second rewatch. It matches. It's not like the workout warrior who's been there. Either one is a reach, but that's probably where I'm going because you just have questions with the rest of the guys. If you're really, really stuck there, I'd rather take guys who are in the same neighborhood and have question marks, but at least I know exactly where they're going to play and what I need from them, even if there's still some uncertainty, because I just feel like there's uncertainty with the rest of the prospects in that range too.
Yeah. So you would go Membu over Tet?
It would be one of the two. Like if I cannot trade back, and I would be saying, I will sell this for a nickel. Like I will take an extra 4th rounder or a 3rd rounder. If Vegas wanted to come up from 6, that's what it would take by the modern trade value charge is an extra 3rd round pick. That's great to go back 2 spots. If you can't do it though, even for a 4th, then yeah, probably. Because here's the other part about trading back, and I've said this before. If you do take McMillan or Membu, and I understand there's the reach aspect, not best player available. If they're all in the same tier, at that point, like the difference is negligible. I'm not going to freak out about that. If I'm the Patriots, I want more ammo to move back into the 1st round. Like that is my plan B. The plan B is not a player. It's Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter at Ford. Plan B is then I need more ammo to get 2 guys in the 1st round, not just 1 at number 4.
Yeah, it's a good point because then you could come back in and say get Connerly from Oregon or something, get your left tackle like later on in the 1st round. But it's just a tough spot in that you presented the nightmare scenario if Carter and Hunter are off the board because those are the 2 blue chippers in the drafts. And you just think about it. If you're in this position a year ago, and obviously you got your quarterback, but we knew quarterbacks are going 1, 2, 3. Your choice is basically Harrison, Malik Neighbors, who I liked more just because he's more of a freak of an athlete, or Joe Alt. So no questions about Joe Alt in terms of size or anything like that. So you get an elite left tackle or an elite receiver. Like you honestly could have had Neighbors, Harrison. You could have had Bowers and like Brian Thomas Jr., probably the number 1 receiver in this draft, who went later on in the 1st round. So it's just like, could the Patriots have done something late in the season to avoid this situation totally? Oh yeah, they could have lost the last game. And then that nightmare scenario would have never played itself out. And they could just be sitting here with the number 1 pick. And to your point, like even if they didn't take Carter or Hunter and they traded back, well, they could probably still end up with one of them because one of those teams would have traded up to get the quarterback at that position. So this could have all been avoided. But hey, here's where we are. I still think I'm confident. I'm going to say, Callahan, I'm like, at this point, I didn't think one of those guys was going to be there a couple of months ago. I'm like 60-40 right now, maybe even closer to 70-30 that they're going to come away with one of them because the quarterbacks always get overdrafted.
It's true. And I'm glad you turned that around because I was about to say this is a terrible time to have a commercial break in which you were scaring people away with the memories of that last game against the Bills, who out-tanked you, who out-sucked you, and you came away with a win that nobody wanted in what was a baseball game environment for those of us who were there. But you come around and say, hey, you still think Travis Hunter or Alvin Carter will be there. I don't know. I can't see it with sure. But I understand the desperation of teams and the history of the position and what happens. And Christian Ponder and EJ Manuel, like that's how this happens. It's a vacuum at the top. I get it. I'm going to share your optimism for the sake of my mental health over the next 4 weeks, which are going to get very silly with the silly season. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to know what this offense is going to look like. And I have a hot take that I don't even know if it's that hot, but I think it's going to surprise you one way or another after this.
The Patriots had Christian Gonzalez and Drake Maye fall into their laps in consecutive first rounds. But could lightning really strike a third time and provide one or both of these young blue-chip players dynamic partner for the long term? Today, I'm breaking down cornerback / wide receiver Travis Hunter, whether or not he should be a lock for the Patriots if he falls to the 4th overall pick, and where exactly he should spend most of his time if he ultimately lands up in New England. Hunter played a nearly even split of corner and receiver during his junior year at Colorado, totaling 776 snaps on defense and 753 snaps on offense, according to PFF. Hunter ranked top 5 among FBS prospects in this draft with 96 receptions, 1,258 receiving yards, and 15 receiving touchdowns in 2024. Hunter excelled on vertical routes like goes and posts, where he adjusted to errant throws and was unaffected by contact or traffic. His 14 deep catches and 6 touchdowns were top 3 among FBS prospects, and he didn't record a single drop on targets of 20 or more air yards. Hunter also showed excellent ball tracking and downright arrogant hands, and both were on display on this highlight against Cincinnati. Hunter's press defender tries disrupting him early with the jam, but he isn't disrupted and shoots past the corner to win deep. The go ball is underthrown, but despite being clotheslined while trying to adjust, Hunter shows incredible focus to complete the catch for an and 1 along the sideline. With Colorado facing an improbable 3rd and 12, Hunter gets a target on a shallow crosser with room to work underneath. He quickly snatches a pass against his momentum and burns 2 bad angles from BYU defenders. He then sets up a closing linebacker for a juke, pulls away from a safety, and races down the field before ultimately throwing a stiff arm and heading out of bounds. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to become a member of Patriots Press Pass on YouTube to get full access to videos like this and much more really fun content. I cannot wait for you to see it.
Okay, so 2020, Patriots go 7-9. It's a Cam Newton season. No one's in the stands. No one really remembers this too fondly. But if you go back to that tape, there are going to be some surprises there. You are going to see more RPOs under a Josh McDaniels offense than you've ever seen before. You're going to see more quarterback run game than you've ever seen before. You're going to see people being moved up front in a way the Patriots have failed to for the last 3 years. I think, Brian Barrett, when you look and ask, what is this offense going to look like with Josh McDaniels coming back for the 3rd time and Drake Maye? No weapons, multiple tight ends, some good backs. I'm telling you, I think they're going to run it back with the Cam Newton offense. Because this is an offense that's only strength right now looks to be running the football. And you can go, oh, the offensive line still stinks, Callahan. What are you talking about? Garrett Bradbury gave up pressure like he was a vending machine last year in Minnesota. But when it came to the running game, was one of the best graded centers in all of football when it came to run blocking. Morgan Moses, same thing at right tackle. So you get upgrades at those 2 positions, sandwiching Mike Onwenu, who, thank God for him, can just play one position and stick to it. Okay? Left side's a question mark, I'll grant you that. But Ramondre Stevenson is the only player, it seems like the staff has universally showered with praise since the season started. Drake Maye, as we know, can run. Drake Maye also had plenty of experience running RPOs in North Carolina. And if you're looking to offset an offensive line that both can run block decently well, let's say. Let's not give him everything right now, but slightly above average. But has issues in pass protection. Well, RPOs are what you want to do, man. You either get the ball out quickly in a handoff or flip it downfield on a bubble screen or a slant or a slug, whatever it might be, and get the ball out that way. That is what the Patriots did in 2020. That is what I think you will see here in 2025, because this is not all of a sudden going to be a totally new offense. They have to start installing what Josh McDaniels wants to do on April 7th. When they open up that playbook again, it's going to feel like a time machine for everyone who was still here in 2020 going, oh, this is different. No, this is running it back. Instead of Cam Newton, it's going to be Drake Maye.
RPOs are cool, man. Didn't one Patriots quarterback once say that a couple of years ago? RPOs are cool. I want to do more RPOs. That was Mac Jones. But I love the point, because one of the big questions I had is, what is the offense going to look like, right? And how much of a say was Vrabel going to have in it? Because you go back to Vrabel's success really with Arthur Smith, that second year in Tennessee, they're number one in the NFL by a wide margin in play action percentage, right? Like, and they ran the ball a ton, and that's what you do when you have Derrick Henry. But I was so glad that you bring up the Cam Newton year, because if you think about it, last year, this coaching staff, for whatever reason, like, I still can't believe this was a controversial topic, that designed runs. Alex Van Pelt, correct me if I'm wrong, was basically against him. He thought that that's how you get your quarterback hurt. And I always thought that even if you don't want to do it a lot, right? Like, understand protecting your player. But in the first 15 plays of the game, why isn't there a Drake Maye designed run in there? Just to throw the defense off a little bit and make them think about it. You basically never showed that in your arsenal whatsoever. And still, with the lack of weapons as we sit right now, I would be using a lot of Drake Maye in the run game. And a lot of those he can see in front of him, right? It's almost more dangerous from a hit perspective when he's actually scrambling, right? I think about the 2 hits he took last year. One was just a freak hit where he like stumbled and got hit from behind. The other one was like, okay, man, like, probably could have got out of bounds a little sooner, like on that right sideline. But I hope you're right.
That up. Like, that is something, if he shared with us, Vrabel has absolutely told Drake Maye in his first conversation, hey, get down, chill out.
Yeah, but I think this could, I hope you're right. And I hope there's design runs, the RPO game, because if you go back to Drake Maye at North Carolina, to your point, he was really good in those situations. So it's not going to be a massive adjustment for him. I just wonder, my question about the dynamic of the offense is, how much say does Vrabel have? Do you think this is just, hey, Josh, this is your offense, this is your baby? Because that's kind of what he did in Tennessee, right? I mean, unless he had more of a role than I thought, but he brought in LaFleur, and then Arthur Smith, they have him come in there, and he's just basically just a ton of play action with Ryan Tannehill, taking advantage of your quarterback and your great running game with Derrick Henry. So I assume it's going to be similar, right? Where he just kind of hands it over. I don't think that we're going to get the press conference where Mike Vrabel says, hey, Josh is the head coach of the offense, but I do think essentially that's what it's going to be.
I think that phrase hopefully has been retired in Foxboro forever. That is like buried next to all the balls from all the worst games they've ever played. When you do that ceremonial thing on the Wednesday or Tuesday after, we're going to bury the ball. We're going to forget the game tape. I think they did that in 05, maybe after a bad Chargers loss. Anyway, play action is the part I forgot about in there. I'm really glad you brought it up, because play action was also a staple of that passing game with Cam Newton, which is, again, remembered for as many balls in the dirt as those caught in the end zone. No one's arguing that. The Patriots had a 33% play action rate that year, which, if it didn't lead the league, was top 3. I would guarantee you, bet you anything, that is going to come back, because the Patriots were in bottom 10 of the league all year last season in play action. That was fruit, low-hanging, left on the limb. That was a $20 bill on the sidewalk, left undetended. They're going to pick up the $20 bill this year. They're going to grab that low-hanging fruit, and they're going to maximize whatever they can out of this offense, because that's what Josh McDaniels did with Cam Newton in 2020. It's what he's going to do with Drake Maye between the play action, RPOs, and they're going to be as run-heavy as they can. And I do think Vrabel will have an influence there, but it will be limited to, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z in the way Belichick used to do, right, in Tuesday meetings and coaches. However you want to do it's fine, but we have to accomplish X or Y or Z. Block somebody, run this certain play in the red zone, target this person on defense, whatever. Vrabel will have the outline of the plan, and then Josh gets to fill it in.
And just to interject real quick on that, I feel like Drake Maye is going to be amazed, because he played at North Carolina under Mac Brown. And I know Mac Brown way back in 05 won a national championship. I think that was more about the talent of Vince Young. But that North Carolina team was, to put it politely, not very well coached. And last season, he had arguably the worst coaching situation in the NFL. And now it's like, whoa, we got Vrabel, we got Josh McDaniels. What is this? This is how football is supposed to be. Oh, we're going to take advantage of these things that are like easy. We're going to make my life easier in a sense. Let's do that. Like, Drake Maye is going to be amazed.
And you know what, too? Like, this is a credit to McDaniels, who did not obviously have any kind of success in Vegas. He's canned after a year and a half. But he's adaptable, I think, more so than people realize. And this is not to crown him one of the greatest offensive coordinators ever. I think he's a good offensive coordinator. There's no debate. I'm not interested in talking about that. What I'm interested in stressing is the fact that in 2020, when they're under center a ton, one of the highest run rates in the entire league, and you squeeze a 7-9 record out of a bad roster led by a washed Cam Newton, you go fast forward 2 years. He is fully in control of Las Vegas. That first season, they were dead last in RPOs in the entire league. They had an average use of motion on passing plays and running plays, a number that would fluctuate year to year within that offense. And they were one of the heaviest under center offenses. So, a lot of that goes hand in hand. You're mostly running RPOs from shotgun. But the point is, 2 years apart, Josh McDaniels was running a wildly different system. And some of it with no practice time, like you saw in 2020, and the other with as much control and input and say as you could possibly have as a head coach in Vegas. And the systems looked different enough where I think he will and can and should adapt again here in 2023. All right, we have 3 big questions left. I'm going to keep mine short, but first you go with number 5.
So I had which one of the young receivers is going to be the best of this group? Because you have, and we'll see what they add to the roster too, but you have Demario Douglas, who 2 years ago I thought was awesome. He was top 5 in the NFL in yak per reception, like behind guys like Deebo Samuel and that group of guys, like in terms of how dynamic he was with the ball in his hands. And I think some of it was the coaching staff last year. Like, remember after the Jets game, he was upset. He was basically just doing cardio, like barely getting targeted. But then, like, Baker, I think, has a ton of talent. Polk, I thought, obviously underwhelmed. But I really liked what we saw from Kayshon Boutte down the stretch of the season. I mean, even if you go back to Drake Maye's first touchdown pass was to Kayshon Boutte. I thought Kayshon Boutte had a lot of good moments last year. So I think the obvious bet would be Demario Douglas, just because he's a slot receiver that we've seen in the McDaniels offense can be really productive. And I think they could get that out of Demario Douglas. But I'm really intrigued with Boutte. Like, this guy was a big-time recruit at the college level, like broke the record in terms of the most yards in an SEC game. It just, things kind of got out of whack for him. But out of the guys we saw last year, I thought he showed the most promise. But do I think he can ever be like a number 1 or maybe even a number 2 receiver? No, but I think he can be productive next year in this offense for the Patriots. If I was going to say who's going to have the most production, it'd be Demario Douglas. But Boutte's the guy that was the most encouraging to me last year.
Yeah, and it's funny because I will stay consistent. For folks who have asked me a mailbag question about Kayshon Boutte, I just think he's a 4 or 5. Like, he did have more yards, to your point. He won in some contested catches and on the long balls, which I think were also perfectly dropped into his arms. But I think the worst case scenario in 2025 is that he, again, is the most productive of those guys. Because what that means is your second-round pick in Jalen Polk and your fourth-round pick, Javon Baker, who some people in the league still point to and go, that's their most talented guy. And I think there's a case for that, have busted out after 2 years. And losing a fourth-round pick is whatever. Boutte did not fall because of talent, though he tested terribly at the combine a couple of years ago. I just think if you're the Patriots, you have to hope for more from Polk. You have to hope for more from Baker, and at least just get it out of one of them. So it's interesting because it's a good question. I think they'll certainly draft, if not day 1, someone on day 2 to add to that group because, Demario Douglas has a clearly identifiable role, right? And that's part of the equation here. How much opportunity do you get? Polk and Baker and Boutte are all fighting for the same snaps. Demario Douglas is like, put me in the slot, let me go to work. I think his play feel and his route running still needs to be refined. And maybe that's something that you can never scrub out or finish, but we'll see. At least he'll get an opportunity. The guys on the outside, they have to hope you get more from Polk because they drafted him to be a day 1 plug-and-play starter. And that's not because I said it. It's because Elliott Wolf said it.
Yeah, I just think, too, with Douglas, I think they're just going to target him a lot more, right? Because we've seen this in the Josh McDaniels offense. Those slot guys get a ton of targets. I just think he's going to get targeted a lot more next season. I mean, we've seen this with how many different – and I'm not comparing him to the players, but we saw it with Edelman. We saw it with Welker. We've seen it with multiple guys throughout the McDaniels tenure in terms of
Jacoby Myers.
Jacoby Myers. Yeah, great example. Jacoby, he'd be the best receiver on the Patriots right now, by the way. But I think we see it. I don't want to say like even a bounce back from Douglas, but maybe what we thought his second year was going to be last season, that's what he'll do this upcoming year.
Yeah. All right. Here's my last question. I promise to make it short. I'm going to follow through on that promise. Can Elliott Wolf or Ryan Cowden or whomever is atop the front office seal the deal on a trade under pressure? Now, remembering back to August, Elliott Wolf, who's had a lot of missteps, called out in this podcast, some slower than others, but in real time, screwed up the offensive line a year ago. We all saw it, and it was, how could this be possible? Around a terrible press conference that he gave last August, he did a good bit of business with the Matthew Judon trade, getting him for a third-round pick. Everyone would call that a win for the Patriots. You didn't even have to wait 2 months for that to be a win. There is a difference, though, between negotiating comfortably with the benefit of time and space and negotiating under pressure or without any kind of leverage, like you had with the Brandon Ayuk deal, like you had on draft day when you couldn't jump back into the first round and get Keon Coleman or Xavier Legette, who they wanted to go get a year ago. Excuse me, it was Legette, not Coleman. Because the only way they landed Milton Williams in their last negotiation under pressure was just to give in. Okay, we'll go higher. We'll give you more money. We'll go higher. We'll go higher. It's not a negotiating tactic. That is completely capitulating, and that's fine. Milton Williams got a lot of money. He deserved it. Patriots had a ton of money. They deserved and had to spend it. They got their guy. But I want to know, can you as a GM not only just identify talent, but get what everyone else wants, okay, at the same time that everyone else wants it? Whether that's a trade back here or a trade for Brandon Ayuk, I need to know that they, as GMs or whomever it is, can do that because it's a big part of the job we don't talk a whole lot about. And there's only one way to know it, and it's to study and be in those scenarios over time. I think we're getting close to a sufficient enough sample to judge Elliott Wolf as GM, provided, again, he's still in power and we don't really know. But you need to get a deal done under pressure. And so far, they haven't done it.
Yeah, and if the Ayuk thing becomes real, that would be the one that I would point to, right? Because last year, they almost did everything they possibly could, right? They were willing to offer him the most money of the other teams, but he wasn't willing to come to the Patriots. I would think this time around, like one of the questions Ayuk had was, well, the quarterback situation. I think after you watch Drake Maye play, you'd be like, well, he's more talented than the guy that I've been catching passes from for the past couple of years. And I'm not saying Purdy's a bad quarterback, but there's no question who's a more talented quarterback, Drake Maye or Purdy. So I think that would be a reason that Ayuk, because San Francisco's going to trade him. It's going to be like, you're not trading for that contract if you don't have assurance the player wants to be there, right? Because he's on a massive receiver contract. I think Drake Maye is now an attraction for that type of player, that he would want to actually play with Maye. And the fact that he knows the Patriots wanted him, right? It's like, dude, we were willing to give you more money than you got. You don't want to come here? We're desperate for you, bro. Come over here. Let's go.
Brian's not upset. He's let go. He's let go and he's moved on. He's not bitter about that still from last August. But I hear you. It's tough. You know what I would like? You and I just to be able to stop doing these segments about who's the next receiver that's available. Just get one. Okay? People are sick of listening to them and ask about this guy and that. You mentioned Ayuk. I covered him a lot on the last episode I did. In case anyone missed it, go back and listen. The soft deadline, soft _ bold, all caps, soft deadline is April 1st when the Niners will have to guarantee him combined with an option bonus in 2025 and 2026, something like $50 million. So for a team that has been insistent on slashing salary and cap space and not having to spend as much cash, that's kind of when you need to get that deal done. And it would be at the owners' meetings with a lot of other teams around. We'll see if it happens. All right, your last question. Then we have 4 mailbags that I promised last week to get to, and we'll run through those.
Can Drake Maye be the most popular athlete in Boston by the end of next season?
Oh, I love this. Keep going.
Because, so first of all, it's football, so it takes center stage. And I really feel like we were all caught up in whatever you want to call it, Drake mania, and they were losing games last year. Now, Jason Tatum right now, I would say wears the crown. And I think that number 2 on that list right now is probably Jaylen Brown after he won the NBA Finals MVP and the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Now, if the Celtics don't, and I hope I'm wrong about this, if they don't win the championship, right? Obviously, if Tatum gets back-to-back titles, it's going to be impossible to pass Tatum. But I don't think there's a Bruin on that list as great of a season as David Pasternak's having. The Bruins are a complete dumpster fire right now. I think the only Red Sox that could get into the conversation, or maybe like one of the young guys could, but Rafi's never been that guy. Crochet could be that guy where he could have like a Sale type first year. But let's say you look at the Patriots schedule, and I know this changes every year once the season starts, but it's 30th. What if they're just like close to 500 somehow, right? What if they're just like competing for a playoff spot down the stretch of the season? A lot of it's going to be because the quarterback is that good. So I think there is, I don't think it's a likely scenario, but I do think there's a scenario where Drake Maye becomes, even though Tatum is the best athlete in Boston right now, Drake Maye actually takes over that spot just because, whoa, we have an interesting football team again? That hasn't happened since 2021 when they made the playoffs. Think about how popular Mac Jones was in 2021. We all loved Mac Jones. You go to 2022, it's a mess. 2023, it's a mess. 2024, it's a mess. Like, I know we sound like, as people that watch the Patriots, it was completely spoiled, but we have not watched a relevant football team in years now, right? 2 years ago, we're cheering for them to lose at the end. Last year, we're cheering them to lose. If Drake Maye just brings this back to a competitive team, and let's say, like, and I know they beat the Bills last year, but let's say they have a great game against the Bills and they go toe to toe, and like, whoa, Drake Maye threw for 303 touchdowns. Allen threw for 275, but he threw that pick at the end of the game, and the Patriots actually beat the Bills. I do feel like there's an opportunity here for Drake Maye just because of the sport he plays.
So I'd even go a little bit further. Like the guy, as everyone has seen and heard, is a natural. Like that goes behind the podium, where even at his peak of his powers, Mac was a little bit robotic. You knew this was all tailored and prepared. I'm just going to say the thing that I'm expected to say. Drake's got enough cliches at the podium that he's never going to get in trouble. But there's also the puppy head tilt of like, what are you saying to me? Like there's enough authenticity there that people identify and they think feel closer to Drake Maye. He's also just more exciting, launching bombs, operating outside the pocket, extending plays, that he's got a higher Q rating than maybe Mac ever did, even though they didn't have the same success. That said, you nailed it in terms of think about how popular he was and then how that kept crumbling down, along with the team's record. Now, he started at a higher point, go 10-8, including that wild card loss. Drake Maye was on a 4-13 team. If they improve, if they're in the mix, he can continue to ascend with the team, because I think ultimately the team record and the success is what will drive that popularity or not. Like Tatum lacked the charisma, okay, the puppy dog head tilt. He was honest enough behind the podium. He's just not a charismatic guy. But when you're in the finals and then in the East finals and then you're back in the finals and you win the title, like that's how you get the belt. For Maye, yes, there's a bump from sport. Rookie, can do no wrong, playing quarterback, exciting guy. He's got to win. He doesn't have to win like Mac Jones had to win in year 2, but he has to do better than he did last year, and I think he will. And I think that's a great point, because let's say they even surprise. Let's say they go 6-4 to start the season, and you're saying if you finish 500, you're in the playoffs, man. You know what I mean? Like, or 6-5, like that. That is, I think it might not even take the whole season for him to get there.
And it's stylistically too, the way that he plays, right? Where he rips off these huge runs. Or, for example, I always go back to the Arizona game where he's just running, all of a sudden he flips it into the end zone. It's like, what? How did he even know you could do that? Like, that was unbelievable. So it's his style as well, which is obviously totally different than Max. But even Tatum, who I think Tatum right now is the third best player in the league. Like, I think he will finish third in the MVP. Missoula rest him now after this ankle situation down the stretch of the season. And Tatum is evolved as a player in terms of how he dictates everything the defense does. But like, if you compare like him to other NBA stars, he's not as flashy, right?
No.
To some of these other guys, like just in terms of his style of play, it's not the flashiest style in the NBA. Like, it's not like Curry bombing threes, right? It's not that type of player, right? What he does is great. But Drake Maye, like, he's from this like new version of quarterback, the Josh Allens of the world, the Pat Mahomes of the world, where it is like exciting. I would even like Burrow's a top 3 to 4 quarterback in the league. And he just he had the most passing yards last season. I mean, would have been in the MVP conversation if his team was good. But who's a more exciting quarterback to watch, Drake Maye or Joe Burrow, right? So that's why I think this could be a huge national story too, because if the Patriots, to your point, if they do start 6-4, Drake Maye's playing unbelievably well. He's absolutely like balling to start the season. So that's why I think there's a chance there with the style, the persona, and the fact that he plays football.
The only down part about this is whenever the Celtics run ends, and hopefully it's in June and maybe it's in May, who knows? But you have to podcast in like early July. I have to podcast in early July. We have one fewer idea now that we just talked about. Could Drake Maye be the most popular athlete in Boston, because it will be a dry time, but you know what? We have time to get there, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think it was a great question. All right, we have 4 good questions, not great ones. Sorry, guys. I kid. There are actually some good ones in here from the mailbag. These are leftovers. I promise to gobble up today, when we just had too many last week, and I wanted to split these up. So, speaking of Goblin is asking, our pal Gobs, has there ever been a more clear demonstration that people do not evaluate new evidence than update their beliefs in the Will Campbell nonsense? He could have shown up at the combine without arms at all, and people who want an offensive tackle for the Patriots still would be clamoring for him at number 4. Okay, so Goblin agrees with you and I that Will Campbell's arms and his wingspan, let's be clear, wingspan is a more predictive, more important measurement of play when evaluating prospects. Okay. The shortest wingspan in 15 years of any tackle at the combine, just over 80 inches. Okay. Is a problem. It's an outlier problem. But I think the idea that people are only confirming their priors, right, is not new. Like, and that goes well beyond sports. So I'm not as fired up about this as our guy is. But I look, man, the other part about this is that the need is such that sometimes you'll buy spoiled meat at the market if you just really want a hamburger. I don't know. Like, if people really want something long enough, in this case, a left tackle, which Patriots have not had, save for the first 8 weeks of 2023 when Trent Brown was here. You can talk yourself into it. And I think it's a human nature thing versus a prospect thing.
Well, it's just such an exception. And why would you make an exception with the 4th pick in the draft? Because you need the left tackle. Elliot Wolf just talked about the other day, and I don't know, I feel like he took a shot at some of the players he selected last year where he talked about drafting for a need. He said that Drake Maye worked out, but it just doesn't make sense to draft a guy with that level of question mark with the 4th overall selection when you could get a guy that's a blue chipper at a position that maybe you don't need, but you're better off in the future with that guy because if you're moving Campbell to guard, it wasn't worth the 4th overall pick.
Yeah, if you are, I don't know, you feel like Will Campbell might be the safer, more impactful pick, whether it's a left guard or left tackle, year one. This is not, the goal is not to win as many games only in 2025. This is a long-term rebuild. Travis Hunter could be an all-pro receiver or corner in year 2 of his career, the way that I see it, and I know some agree with me, maybe not year 3. Wouldn't you love to have that guy for Drake Maye, who's also in year 3, might be pushing for the same things? I would. I don't think anyone's saying that, though, about Will Campbell. All right, Carlos asking about our favorite receivers for day 1, day 2. He's getting graded, this Carlos. And day 3 of the draft. But, of course, we'll serve them up to him. I'm going to go really quickly on these because you had McShay, and I want to hear what he shared with you and your own observations about these receivers. Day 2. This is for my money on draft Twitter, the hottest prospect at any position right now. Jaden Higgins, 6'4" receiver out of Iowa State, smooth mover, had a good showing at the Senior Bowl, outstanding ball skills, massive wingspan. He's competitive. I think is a guy who could play inside and out. We know they need to fill that X receiver spot. Got enough speed, obviously the size, put him in there. Jack Beck at a TCU, another Senior Bowl guy. He's only 6'1", physical, tough. We talk about contested catches is the one thing that Mike Vrabel brings up over and over and over again. He's got it, plus ball skills. Here's my day 3 guy that I don't hear as much about. Torrey Horton out of Colorado State. He was injured midway through the 2024 season, but he clocked a 4.41 at the combine. He's 6'2 and a half. He's a 2-time captain for the Rams, a solid route runner, as I described with Jalen Polk, and this was a miss. Seems to have a mature game. That's a guy that I think you buy a little bit lower on because of the injury and the small school stuff. But ultimately, the leadership, the physical skill set, the production that he had at Colorado State pre-injury, all those boxes are checked. That's a guy I would love for them to grab round 3, maybe round 4.
Yeah, so first round, obviously, I like Hunter the most, but the other receiver is Matthew Golden from Texas, who he was the fastest receiver at the combine, ran a 4.29, actually the second fastest player in the combine in totality. And like McShay was talking about this, they tried to force Isaiah Bond as like their number 1 guy for like the first half of the season. And then they just started featuring Golden more, and he went nuts. I mean, the Georgia game in the SEC title game, 8 for 162, 7 for 149 against Arizona State. So like say hypothetically, if you're not trading back into the first round for your left tackle, maybe it's Golden there if you're trading back in for that position. I'm with you in terms of Higgins. He's actually, you look at some of the stuff in terms of the combine, 5th in athleticism score 2 in totality and 4th in total score, 87 grabs for 9 touchdowns. And you know, I love this, 2nd ranked receiver in PFF grade last year in the entire country. So that's when I go to my soft spot guy. So I'm with you on him. And then the soft spot I have is Trey Harris, because Trey Harris did not have a good combine, but he was injured all year. Like he was in and out of the lineup for Ole Miss. He was 3rd in PFF score last year. And whenever he's on the field, like I don't believe some of the combine stuff with him because like he's just so good. Like when he's actually on the field, and we've seen now this recent history of Ole Miss receivers have a lot of success. And we're talking about Metcalf and we're talking about AJ Brown. I know it's a different coaching staff with Lane Kiffin in too, but that would be like an unconventional one just because of the injury concern and not testing well. But I do really like Trey Harris from when I actually watched him play a lot at Ole Miss. I watched almost every Ole Miss game last year. When he was actually on the field, you can tell he's a total difference maker.
Yeah, I'd look at this class as a whole, too, as we move on here in a sec. Like, Trey Harris is a great example of this. There's not a whole lot of blue chip guys at the top, right? It's Ted McMillan, Matthew Golden, who I would have mentioned, except for I just don't think he's going to be there. Even if the Patriots want to trade back, they'd have to get under 20, and I just don't think that's going to happen. But the middle part of this class has got a lot of useful players. Like, again, Jack Beck or Trey Harris or my guy, Torrey Horton. Like, you just see it and you go, I see a role there. And they might be 2s and 3s, but if you're the Patriots, you would love it to. And if you hit on some of these upside guys, either due to the athleticism that doesn't match their production, or they're hurt, like in Horton's case, and you just feed them the ball, and they're professionals as rookies. Like, there's some upside there. So there are a lot of useful players in the middle of this class. Anyone you don't like, you want to stay away from?
I'm not the biggest tech guy. Like, I'm just a little worried about that. Like, when it first came out, like the 40 time, and they're like, oh, 4.48, and then everyone's like, actually, no, it was more like 4.55. And then the only comparison is Mike Evans, and I'm like, well, hold on a second. We're now going to compare him to, I don't know, the second, third, or fourth best receiver of his generation. And Mike Evans, like, have you ever seen him when the ball's in the air? Like, nobody's like that guy. He's an absolute freak show. And the model of consistency right there, he's out there every week. And that's like the only example you look at from a 40 time perspective. And even if the Tet one was a 4.55, that's not where Mike Evans was. I know like a lot of people like McMillan, and I'm not saying like I don't like dislike him. I don't want to be taking him with the 4th overall pick when I have that question just about the speed, and comparing anybody to Mike Evans. I just think that's a difficult proposition.
This is a conversation for another day, and you and I were having it off air to start the show. But like, sometimes the insider industry is just so transparent in that the information you got was from an agent who, of course, has an agenda and a slant, and the copying and pasting straight to your Twitter feed as you are nothing more than a vehicle for their agenda, as opposed to someone with a brain who should weigh, okay, is this really true? Who can I confirm this with? Who's an independent source that I should verify this? Is just embarrassing. And when it's something as verifiable as a 40 time, oh, you mean Ted McMillan didn't run a time faster than anyone ever expected, and he's maybe ever run in his life? What a surprise. And 30 minutes later, the real time comes out. Maybe don't do that. Guys who, again, granted, will report a lot more than me, probably over my entire career, and that's fine. But at least you know the stuff you get from me is not going to be straight from somebody else, and I'm just a yellow light with a phone along the way.
And the other thing is, like, if that first time that came out was actually accurate, he would have run at the combine, because he would have been confident that he would have got to that point. This isn't a Marvin Harrison Jr. situation where he knew he was going somewhere in the top 5. Like, he ran at his pro day. Marvin Harrison, I mean, this is a complete outlier, did absolutely nothing. But if he thought he had that time in him, he would have run at the combine.
Yeah. And even if you want the extra couple of weeks, like, I don't know. Like, I think, especially after a full season of football, shaving off that much, that's an appreciable difference. But I'm not an agent. I'm not a player. I don't have to make those decisions. If you
were they even bowl eligible? Dude, season ended early.
This is too far back now. This is where my memory gets very hazy around the holidays, and no longer am I waiting to buy gifts because I'm procrastinating. It's just I can't retain information come December because I've been rewatching Patriots offense over and over and over again and talk about them here, and it's an issue. Anyway, 2 more. Mr. Ja, quote, is there any chance of us, meaning the Patriots, moving up to number 3 in the draft? Mr. Ja, I would put that at a 1% because Patriots would then have to surrender some sort of draft capital, which they have been holding very close every night before they go to bed and are looking forward to that extra 3rd round pick that they have and a couple extra 7th. So no, I don't see that happening. In addition to the fact that you and I have already covered, like, okay, if they get to 4, Hunter Carter's there, you just send in the pick. If they're not, you hope to trade back, which would be the opposite of what you're suggesting.
Yeah, and I even think from a Giants angle, even if they say they're not taking the quarterback, then they're going to get a better offer from somebody, say, like, maybe, I don't know if they do it. Yeah, probably like the Jets, somebody, or the Saints, right? Like, if the Saints really like one of those guys, like, they would get a better offer from one of those teams to move up rather than a team at 4 and the Patriots moving up to 3. I think that if they don't take a quarterback, they traded for Burns and they drafted Thibodeau a couple of years in the 1st round. I think they would take Hunter. So, I mean, I guess the best case scenario would be in that situation is if the quarterbacks went 1 and 2, and then I would imagine the Giants take Hunter, and then Carter's still there for you. Now that's going through a lot of different situations there, but I don't see any I just don't see any way they go to the Patriots get to 3. It just doesn't make any sense for either team, like for the Giants or the Patriots.
Right. If you're in this scenario and a quarterback's there, then you have a greater chance of trading the pick and moving back and getting more draft capital, which again is not just because you can add more rookies, but it gives you more currency to move up and down the board. And that all said, I understand the question here of, okay, well, if one quarterback goes, you can guarantee yourself Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, why wouldn't you do it? I'm just telling you the way they're looking at this, in addition to growing outside confidence, the 2 quarterbacks will go ahead of them. They'd rather have more picks to make this happen. And they also, again, that's not an inexpensive move up. That's the other thing, right? Like if you feel like they can still get a good offensive tackle and a receiver, with their first pick and use that second, third rounder to move back up, and you already move up, then you're not coming back into the first round for that extra guy. You know what I mean? So it's some significant opportunity cost here that you wouldn't otherwise consider because it's just one spot. Well, no, the one spot from 4 to 3, just like 2 to 1 is a big leap.
By the way, now that you mentioned that extra third round pick, I do want to give Elliott Wolf credit for one thing. That was a pretty good piece of business to get a top 100 pick for Judon. That was a really good trade. Like one of the best moves he's made. I mean, outside of drafting Drake Maye, but I mean, that was pretty obvious. But that was a good move.
Again, the benefit of time and space to be like, we'll just sit on this and it's training camp. And if he wants to grumble, that's fine. And we'll tell him, hey, we'll eventually trade you. Just kind of show up. And then Atlanta goes, oh, they're actually serious about this. And they up their offer. Great. You had time and leverage. You do not have time and leverage when you're on the clock. So I want to see what business they do then. Last one from Pyramid, the podcast. We all witnessed Dante Scarnecchia take a brutal offensive line and coach up the same personnel to be significantly better in 1 year. Are we all overreacting by the lack of names being signed to the offensive line when Vrabel and Doug Marrone could simply coach them up and make them be better? So here's the thing about the greatest offensive line coach of all time. He's the greatest offensive line coach of all time. And for the folks like Brian and I, we're inclined to see it, be visual, give us some numbers, give us some metrics, tell us how much of a difference there is between a Dante Scarnecchia and a Doug Marrone. PFF had an outstanding article, and if you email me, I will dig it up and send it to you, or you can Google this on your own, that basically had a wins above replacement for offensive line coaches. And there were 2 that made a difference. It was Dante Scarnecchia and Bill Callahan, now with the Titans, previously the Browns. He's been a lot of different places. Doug Marrone is not in that group. He's a good position coach, been an offensive coordinator, been a head coach. I get that. But Dante Scarnecchia made such a difference in the same way that you'd be like, well, like, if Tom Brady took a bad offensive line and made them better, why can't Drake Maye, who's really talented, do the same? There's one Tom Brady. And as good of a quarterback as Drake Maye is and will be, we all believe in that, he's not going to be the greatest ever. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, and that's why I just look at the personnel, where last year, the tackles for the Patriots in PFF grade, Vidarian Lowe and DeMontre Jacobs, out of 87 tackles, they were 72nd and 87th. So, you could look through the left tackle class and say, hey, so-and-so overpaid for Cam Moore, right? You look through the list and you say, these guys, they're not perfect players. It's just about can you just get closer to the middle of the pack with that position, right? Where it's just okay, we don't have the worst guys in the league at that position. That's why I do think the line is clearly, it'll be better coached this year with Doug Marrone, even if he's not Scarnecchia, and Moses, even if he's not a perfect player and he's aging. I mean, that's at least a solid, you have a solid right tackle. We mentioned on when you earlier, Bradbury, at least in the run game, he's going to be good for you. And then we'll figure out what's going to happen with Cole Strange. But I think that even as great as Scarnecchia is, I don't know what he could have done with that group last year with the tackles, right? I mean, think about it. You had a guy quit. Okorafor just quit. The whole idea was at least Scarnecchia was coaching guys that had played those positions, right? It's hey, Okorafor, he may be a left tackle. Caden Wallace, we drafted. His teammate was the left tackle that got drafted in the first round. We're going to try to make him into a left tackle. You said all these question marks. It didn't make sense. I can still remember the date, August 19th. Elliott Wolf says, we feel good about the group. We just have to find the right combinations. And I know, what is he going to say? Hey, I think our group sucks. I actually think he really thought somehow it was going to work out. But you have to at least have average level talent. And no offense to the Vidarian Lowe's of the world and the DeMontre Jacobs of the world and the Ben Browns of the world. Those guys weren't average players. Ben Brown graded out as the worst center in the league. So, yeah, the coaching was not good, but you have to have a baseline level of talent.
Yeah, and the short way to put all that, which was well said and pointed out, that this is not these were street free agents and waiver claims and practice squad guys: Ben Brown, Demontre Jacobs, and Vidarian Lowe. Right, like that's pretty much what they all were last year or the year before. Even if the Patriots make an appreciable jump, you go not from bad to average. You go from worst in the league to bad with this talent, even with Moses and Bradbury. So that's now you're asking the coach to take a historically bad offense that's improved a little bit to average. It's just a bigger leap. Like you're now the Giants or the Panthers. Like, congrats. It's a tough situation. I do think there are ways to mitigate that. Maye, McDaniels, Doug Marrone. But I just want to revere what Dante Scarnecchia did, not only with better talent from your Matt Lights to your Nate Solters to even Trent Brown, who we, lit a fire under his ass, and Marcus Cannon was available. Like those lines were always better in talent. I love the optimism and the hope, but just have realistic expectations because the talent is the talent is the talent. All right. He is Brian Barrett of the Off the Pike podcast. Listen, subscribe, rate, review as much as you can over there on Spotify. Again, Tom McShay was on recently. Sox previews coming up. Celtics always. Anything else you got to plug?
No, just fired up, man. I mean, we get the draft coming up, so we'll be covering that like crazy. Like you said, I have an episode of McShay in there. I got a full Red Sox preview, as you alluded to, with Julian McWilliams coming up it'll be in the feed by later on tonight. And then Thursday, be recapping the first Red Sox game of the year with Garrett Crochet on the mound. It's crazy, man. Like, I'm actually excited for the Red Sox season. And then, of course, once the Celtics playoffs start, we'll be potting like all the time, like after every single game. So yeah, I'm excited, man.
Good stuff. I hope to be at some Celtics games, still TBD in our playoff plans, but we won't do a ton of that here. Maybe some folks like the kind of on the road segments, or I don't remember what I called it when I would go on the road for those road games. And I was in Cleveland last year and Dallas before that, and basically all the cities except for Miami, which would have been really fun the last couple of years. But anyway, I hope to see you at some of those games. I hope Spotify will hook you up with a credential. You can go see and cover and watch them in person. And I appreciate you going overtime. This happens on this podcast for a amount. You do not get paid for any of this, but you hung out for a while, and I think we did the folks a good service, especially after I made them wait a week.
No worries, Callahan. We were talking about this the other day on my pod. We couldn't figure out who it was, but it's between like you, James White, who, congratulations, Tim, just getting the running backs job at Illinois, or Doug Kyde, or maybe Michael Pina. We're trying to figure out who's been the most frequent guest. So you don't have to thank me for the overtime, because I think you're definitely in the top 4. You may be number 1. I mean, it may be your colleague, Doug Kyde, who's like competing with you, and Zach Cox too from the Herald. I mean, Zach Cox is up there as well.
Those are all my guys, James included. I know I saw Michael Pina at the finals last year. I don't think I said hello. But look, as long as I'm in that company, and I'm happy. I also thought for a second you were going to go to like a bracket style, like everyone is doing. Like this is some novel idea on radio or podcast. Oh, March Madness is here. Let's make a bracket of the most random things we can think and seed them. If you do, just please do not put me up against James White and anything else that I can take and feel good about my chances.
Yeah, I don't want to do a bracket, man. That's just it's not right.
It's not right. All right. Well, you would be certainly a high seed. Thank you, Brian Barrett. Again, listen, subscribe, rate, review Off the Pike podcast. It's among the best spots in sports talk you will find anywhere. I'm sure I will be bugging you soon enough. Sound good, pal?
No doubt. Great time, Callahan. Enjoyed it.